Thank you so much for joining us. This is our business webinar on designing a role and the perfect job description. We know it can be tricky, so hopefully the information that we give you today will be really beneficial. We have these conversations day in, day out with clients, so we feel like we know what we're talking about. As many of you know, we're experts in the flexible and part-time recruitment space, and we also provide consultancy services linked in with that. We've got a wealth of experience in the area and in business in general throughout the organisation. So we're always up for these discussions, whether it's on a group basis like this or a one-on-one basis if you've got specific questions. We will be sending out a copy of these slides and a recording for today, so please put your pens down, pick your coffee up and just enjoy listening to Deborah's dulcet tones. On that note, I'm Jo. I'm one of the directors at Ten2Two and your co-host for today. I will be keeping an eye on questions coming through, so pop those in the Q&A box and hopefully we'll get to them either during the conversation or at the end. And I'm joined by our lovely MD, Deborah, who is going to be running you through this useful information. So without further ado, I will hand over and hopefully you'll enjoy what you hear. Hi, Deb.
Hi. Thank you, Jo. Enjoy, that's a strong word. Let's hope it's going to be useful. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm going to head straight into the content here. What are we going to be talking about? So here's our agenda. We're going to spend the first chunk of this meeting on role design. So how you go about role design and the things you should be thinking about. Then we'll move on to actually creating a job description. We'll cover some top tips and then we'll open the floor for questions. So the bulk of the discussion will be for half an hour with 10 minutes at the end for questions. If I speak quicker, we might get a little bit longer. As Jo said, we have these sorts of conversations with clients every day. So really what I've tried to do in this presentation, it's quite a text heavy presentation in terms of what the slides look like. But what I've tried to recreate is the sorts of questions and discussions we would have with a client if they were talking to us about designing a new role and creating a job description. So, so that's what we're going to do. Again, put questions in the Q&A box for Jo, and we will also be sending out a template for the job description. So again, you don't need to be scribbling madly. So job design. The key thing about a job design is you need to understand your circumstances. And generally you're going to have two circumstances. There's going to be an existing role. So somebody is leaving, has been promoted, is going on match leave, or you're going to have a new role. So I just wanted to go through the sorts of considerations you should be thinking about if you have an existing role. So really good place to start is, do you have an existing job description? And even if you think, oh, whoa, that role has changed significantly, often it's a good place to start to see where did you start with this role. So if you haven't, it doesn't matter because you're going to create one through the process. So key question to ask yourself is, has it been working? Have you had feedback from the incumbent that's saying, actually, the role has moved in this direction, I don't like it, or actually the role is too big now, or actually the role is more boring because we've automated so much work. That's the thing to think about when you're amending a job description. And then what's changed since you originally had that job description? So we are seeing a lot with our clients that technology is taking a larger space in people's roles. So that sometimes creates more work, but often just changes the nature of the role. So that's something to identify. What's changed? Do you need someone now who's really technically literate on certain softwares? Or in fact, is the job a lower level than it ever was? Why is the person leaving? I mean, I hope most people do some kind of exit interview. They're really valuable to put into your job description. So if somebody's leaving because of any of those reasons I mentioned before, it's really good to know that, because there's no point recreating a job that actually isn't workable, and all you're going to do is spend a lot of money on recruitment and training for that person to leave. If the issues can be addressed that the person has raised, then great. The things to think about here are, we'll talk about this a bit later on, But the things to think about here is how can the role be split up, made more interesting. So there's lots of things that make a person want to stay in a job. And it's one thing to say, yeah, I've got these business requirements. These are the things that the business needs. But also, if you want that person to stay and be loyal, you need to make sure the job is rounded enough for somebody joining. Then you need to look at your market value of the job. So maybe the person has left because they didn't think the role was worth enough, they weren't being paid enough, or they found a job that actually has increased their salary and it's the same sort of job. So we often see this where if somebody's been in a position for, say, 5 years, the market actually has moved significantly, but salaries haven't kept up with that. So the first thing to do is actually check whether or what level you think this role is at. Then look at the role purpose. So the role purpose is a couple of, the core part of the role. What is the role supposed to deliver? And it's literally an overall arching sentence. Is it the same as it was when you originally created that job description? You probably find it will be, because it's sort of top level strategic overview of the role. Are there any better ways the role could be set up? So with this in mind, this is an area you can explore really quite broadly. So if you now have got technology helping deliver the role, maybe it's not as senior as it once was. Maybe it could be split, and you could have somebody managing the technology and somebody working part-time doing the more strategic work. So there could be someone else in your team who actually could do elements of the role and would love to do elements of the role, but there's never been that opportunity before. So it's really good to look at the role as it currently stands, review it against the business needs and your current team. Then to obviously look at what budget you have available, and this will come up a couple of times as we talk through this, but you need to know what the business can afford and if there's any flex on that. And if that doesn't match what the market value is for the role, then there's going to be some jigging about you're going to need to do with your job design to make sure you get quality candidates. Split of responsibilities that I've already sort of mentioned, that is, could the responsibilities be delivered elsewhere by someone else, maybe an external resource? And then within the whole mix, future considerations. So think about, where does this role fit within the overall organisation and within individuals' succession plans? So is this a role that actually is really quite small at the moment, perhaps part-time mid-management, but you see it becoming in maybe 5 years a really senior role that's going to have big impact for the business? Not that you'd necessarily do anything about that, but it's really good to have those discussions when you're designing the role and when you're recruiting. So there's some things to think about, chat through, if you're just replacing an existing role. If you have a new role, then actually you've just got more flexibility. The world is your oyster almost. So you need to keep the things we've just talked about in mind, but think about how that role has come about and what its key purpose is. So, what are the 1 or 2 things that this role is really responsible for and it's crucial for that job to deliver? Who will it support? So here we would recommend you identify all the key stakeholders. I mean, it could just be one manager that the role reports to, but it could be multiple people across the business. So it's best to keep all of them in mind when you're designing the role. They might have a different view of what that role is supposed to deliver. So it's really good that you know that up front. It also helps you prioritize the things that are important in that job. So when you come to recruit a candidate, you've already got an idea of if they can do the top 4 things, then actually they're worth considering, and because you've already prioritized the responsibilities based on who it's going to support. What level does the role need to be? And this is again that sort of what options are available to you here. And we have Joe will agree with me, we have conversations like this all the time. A client might come to us and they think they need a full-time financial controller. And then when you start asking these types of questions and delving down, actually what you realize is that actually that's too high a level for the work that's required. And the role could be fixed with a 2-day-a-week FC supported by a 3-day-a-week bookkeeper. And so the client ends up having 2 people happy in their roles because they're working at the right level and they save money. So it's a really important thing to think about. Don't just automatically opt for it must be full-time at this level. So when you're at this point and you're considering your options, we just talked about level, but pay is the other thing. So what you want to be able to do is benchmark your role against the pay, and we can always help with things like that. We can let you know the sort of levels of pay that the local market or the London market or wherever you're based is currently commanding for the sort of role you've got in mind. And then hours, we just talked about hours. Don't automatically think full-time. We're seeing more and more requirements, demands from candidates about having flexibility. And that's not just about where you work, that's also how many hours you work. So conversation again, we have quite a lot with clients is that they go for full-time and they recruit, say, a first jobber, second jobber, and then spend a lot of time and effort training those people, only for them to leave a little bit further down the line. But all they could afford was a full-time junior person. So the thing that considering part-time does for you is you can buy in more senior skills on less hours, but it means you've got someone who can hit the ground running. So always something to think about.
An interesting question that's come up on that point exactly is what to consider first. So to define the budget or define the role first?
It's a really good question. And what I would say is you should define the role first. So you identify what the business needs. And if your pay budget can't support that, what that needs, you find, you open your mind and think about different ways you could meet those requirements. So you might need to stagger the recruitment and just recruit the most important bits first, cut the hours. You know, there's lots of ways you can cut it up, but the main thing is to identify exactly what it is the business needs first. Thank you. So then on to contract type. Again, often people don't really think beyond, oh, it must be full-time permanent. So the first thing we would say is it doesn't necessarily have to be full-time. And the second thing is it doesn't have to be permanent. So if you're just covering a project or you think the role might develop or change significantly, sometimes a 6-month contract might be a better solution. And if you're really uncertain about business prospects, perhaps, or whether the role will exist moving forward, then a temporary worker can help you, ride that wave if you want to do that. And you can always make temporary workers, if you fall in love and the role stays, you can always make temporary workers permanent. And again, we see that a lot. So that's a really low risk option if you're not quite sure of your business environment. And location, I've touched on it. I can't really stress how important this is becoming for candidates. The market for candidates at the moment is still really, really tight. We are seeing counter offers, people just turning offers down because it doesn't quite tick all their boxes. I can honestly say probably in the 16 years we've been going, never quite seen a candidate market like this. And we think it's probably, a fallout from the pandemic where people have got much more used to working from home, but they're also much clearer on what's important to them. So, so on location, it's much better to be as flexible as you possibly can. What we are seeing is everything from, 1 day a month to fully remote to what is probably becoming the most common format is this 2-3. So 2 days in the office, 3 at home, or vice versa. And the majority of candidates seem very happy with that. It obviously creates issues in your office in terms of how you manage what your working from home policies are, what your how you manage your time and team building. But that's the content of another webinar, which we're going to be doing later this year. So I think the key message here is location, as flexible as possible, and be prepared at interview. If you find the right candidate, be prepared to flex at that point too. You don't want to lose a really good candidate for the sake of a day in the office, would be our recommendation. And then future considerations, again, think about how this role will fit overall into the organisation. You might want potential to increase the hours or responsibilities in a few years' time. So it's good to include it at this point in the job design.
Just to interject with another question that's come through, with the future development of the role, we've mentioned including it in the job design. Would you encourage actually being open and honest about that in the communication to the candidates about your intentions for the role to grow and develop, be that in responsibility or indeed hours if it is a reduced hours role?
Yes, I think it's better to be as upfront as possible, because what you don't want to do is, recruit someone on 2 days a week, knowing it's going to go to 4, but that candidate can't actually ever do 4. Often we see this working really, really well, actually, because what you might find, particularly from our candidate base, many of our candidates are looking for part-time now, but actually in a year's time, happy to do full-time. Might be the kids are going to school, or they've got other care sorted out for their elderly parents, or that type of thing. So actually, I think it's better to be upfront. If it's going to be just a tweak, if you think it might just go up by a couple of hours, or responsibilities might shift just a little bit, maybe not so important. But I think if you do know where it's going to fit, definitely. I mean, we worked on an FC role very recently, and they knew that in 2 years they wanted that person to be their FD, and that was exactly what their succession plan was. So there wasn't any point having somebody with just 2 years experience at FC level, because they wouldn't have been able to make that jump. And actually, it's really useful for the recruiter to know that as well, or a hiring manager, because you know which type of candidate you really want to be looking for.
Brilliant, thank you.
No worries. Okay, so you've asked some really tough questions. We're always happy to have these conversations with you if you ever want to share them. So just to summarise, the options to consider. So this is literally just a summary of what we've just talked about, which is, what does ideal look like in terms of the role? Can you get that for your budget? If you can't, then that's when you need to be a bit more flexible, open-minded about how you deliver it. What will work best with your existing team? What does my succession plan look like, and how does this role fit? Have I really pushed the boundaries? Have I thought outside the box that might save the business money or have a happier employee? Do you really need full time? Do you really need someone that senior? Or indeed, that could be the other way around. Have you pitched the role too junior for what you're really asking for? Can some of the tasks be allocated elsewhere? Is there someone in your team who actually is chomping at the bit to do some of the things you've got in that job? And crucially, is it pitched at the right level to attract the right candidates? There's really no point designing a job, putting everything into your job description, setting a really low budget, and then being disappointed that there's no candidates that can actually do it. So it's about making sure that it's pitched at the right level and the candidates are going to be excited by it. So I've touched on this as we've gone through, but we're obviously specialists in flexible and part-time working. So I just wanted to quickly spend 2 slides on the benefits of that, in case you've never been exposed to this before. As I said before, that flexibility is literally top of candidates' list. Every piece of research that's been out in the last year is saying candidates want more flexibility. And it could be flexibility in all sorts of ways. It might be holiday, it might be location, it might be hours. So it needs to be in your vocabulary when you're doing job design. In terms of part-time, there's some real business benefits. I've talked about them, but if you're a small growing business, you can start a role on a few hours and just grow the role as the business grows. You can control your costs. So full-time salary can be a really big jump in fixed costs. So if the role can be done in fewer hours, that allows you to just save some money. It can get to talent that perhaps you can't get in the full-time markets. So lots of people often think, oh, part-time workers, oh, that's just junior people, but actually it's really not true. There's some fantastic experienced professionals who really want to work and can bring loads of value to your business, but need to work with some flexibility. It attracts talent, actually. You hit a different talent pool as soon as you start talking about part-time. It's a different talent pool. So if you're struggling with candidates, the same old, the same people keep applying for your jobs, and you just think you can't fill the role, often if you go to the part-time marketplace, you get a different pool of talent, and one we would say is fantastic, of course. By definition, you'll increase your diversity because as soon as you put part-time in the mix, you generally attract more females and often older people. So you can bring diversity into the mix really easily if that's one of your challenges. It improves retention from everything we've just said. You know, you get happier employees, they're more loyal, and actually it's almost becoming a must-have. In terms of some level of flexibility, not necessarily part-time. So just quickly, again, if you aren't familiar with part-time working, the most common formats we see are the top two, which is a part-time day. So that's somebody working every day, but maybe 10 till 2, 9 till 4. And then the second one, sorry, not the second one, everyone's working from home at some level. But again, we've seen that increase massively. The other one is part-time week, where for senior roles, this works really quite well. So a 3-day a week, 3 full days, somebody can get deeply involved in the business and the strategy, but they don't have to be operationally available every day. And then, of course, you have part-time day and week, which is a mixture of those two that I've just described. And we do still see job share, but really it's a tiny, tiny proportion. It works quite well for very senior roles, actually, when there's a day changeover in the middle. So you're actually getting 6 days over the 5. So yeah, so that's, in case you haven't considered flexibility, there's some things to think about. So we're gonna just quickly chat about the factors that makes a job exciting. So as you write your job description or as you're discussing your job design, these are the things we would recommend you think about, because research has shown for a role to be inviting and for someone to want to stay, these are the things. And you can't do them for every role, but if you can, even at a small level, they're useful. So variety, I mean, most of these are self-explanatory, but make sure there is enough variety in the job that doesn't make someone completely bored. A level of responsibility, even if it's a junior role, responsibility for delivery is really important, with some autonomy, because actually being micromanaged, there's very few people who enjoy that. Task identity is just making sure you know what they're supposed to be doing. So somebody can look at their job description and go, right, I'm doing, these are the 5 things I'm supposed to be focused on. Participation in decision making, actually this comes at very high in research, even if it's very junior and you're just asking for an opinion on their thoughts on the software and whether it should be changed. Something like that is still considered participation in decision making and makes people feel valued. Obviously recognition and support, I'm sure you're all brilliant at that. Working environments should go without saying really, but you know, whether it's working from home, checking that people have got the right equipment and they're safely set up, or if you've got an office environment, making sure that's a nice place to work. And then the personal traits, essentials versus desirables. These 2 points are all about splitting out the sort of person you want from a personality versus the skills and experience they bring. We're going to talk a bit more about that. So again, this is like a checklist. If you go back and you look at your job design and you look at all these items, you go, am I ticking these boxes for these things? And if you've got most of them, then you're doing a good job. So I'm going to speed up because I've realized we're running out of time. Job description, 3 main purposes. So it's for you to help define the role. Once it's translated into a job ad, it's about candidate attraction. We're going to talk about the difference between the job ad and the job description next. And then it's also, and this often gets forgotten, it's a reference document for both the manager and the candidate. So it's something you can look back on and say, am I actually doing this job? Am I doing this job well? Should we review the job description? So the difference between a job, I'm sorry, this is a really busy slide, but difference between a job description and a job ad, you can read this for yourself, but the key differences are a job description is an internal document and a job ad is an externally facing document. So your job description is, what does the business want this job to do? It's informative, it's comprehensive and detailed. It tells the job holder what's expected of them and helps the manager know what the job holder is supposed to do. It's a reference document. You can put jargon in it if it's business related, and it's written in the third person. The job ad is the opposite. It's using the job description, but to translate that into a selling document. So it's a sales tool, it's short and succinct. You would optimize it for SEO if you're advertising on the internet anywhere. You don't want jargon, and it's written in the second person to encourage interaction with a potential candidate. So another busy slide, I'm sorry. Key elements of a job description. So as I said, we're going to send you a template, which have got these headings on, but I just wanted to touch on them so you know what should be in them. Some are really obvious. So title, the only thing I would say here is that you might have a quite complex title internally. When you translate to a job ad, make sure it's meaningful to the job market. Because sometimes we do see some odd titles and you just end up with no response because people don't know what you're asking for. Who they report to, who they interact with. The chunkiest part of your job description is going to be key areas of responsibilities and deliverables, along with objectives. So that's, what is this job delivering? What's important? And often I would prioritize that if you can. Is there scope for progression? We don't often see that on job descriptions, but in an ideal world, you would try and put something in there. Then you'd have your required skills, education, experience, and then separately, the soft skills, the personality traits you are looking for someone. So you might be looking for 5 years finance experience or marketing experience in a B2B small business, and that would be part of the experience. But you might be looking for a team player who's got strong leadership skills. That would be your personality traits or soft skills. Where's the role located? The hard stuff, remuneration and benefits. How much is the money? What are your benefits? What's your pension contribution? That type of thing. And then either at the beginning or the end is a little paragraph, short and sweet, about the organization's culture and identity. You might put your vision and mission in there if you've got one, or just a summary of what the company does. So they're your key elements. So top tips. Think outside the box, I think, is probably the key message at every stage. Just think outside the box. Can we change the way the job is delivered? Do we really need these things? What would happen if we did this? Future-proof it as much as possible, if you can. Budget at market rates. Get input at the start from those stakeholders, because they might actually help you do the thinking outside the box. Be realistic and honest. So some people write a job description and then you speak to the post holder and they go, that's not what I do. So you need to be careful that it actually is reflecting the job you want. And also in the same vein, be careful not to put too much into the job description so it just looks like you've thrown the kitchen sink at it. It has to be realistic. Once you've written it, get a second opinion, either from a stakeholder or a recruiter, your HR manager. We're always happy to look at job descriptions, and then review regularly with the person who gets the job, because it's a good tool. So, sorry, I'm slightly over. Sorry, Joe. Questions?
It's okay that you're over because we've got quite a quiet bunch here. They were asking questions before, so please do pop your questions into the Q&A box if you have any. I'll just give you a couple of minutes. Oh, there's a good one come through about desirables versus essentials, asking how strict somebody should be on the essentials.
That's a really good question. So because it's a really tight candidate market, I would say you want your top 3 or 4 essentials, and they're the things you stick to. And when you're hiring and screening CVs, they're the things you check against. If we were recruiting for you, they're the things we'd be saying, what are the most important things for you? And you could always, in a job description, put all of your, you can make some of your essentials desirable, so then you know what your priority order is. Certainly once you get to a job ad, always try and keep your essentials to a minimum, because what you want is to keep your talent pool as open as you possibly can. And what we know from experience is, particularly women, actually, if they can't tick every box on the requirements, they won't apply. So all you're doing is reducing your talent pool by putting too many things on both lists, actually. So job description, it's fine, but I would prioritize them. Job ad, keep them really short.
Awesome. Another really good question has come in. Obviously, there's a lot of content that we've talked about for a job description. Can a job description ever be too long?
Not really, because it's an internal document and it's for the post holder. Not really, but you don't want it to be too. I mean, a couple of pages would be okay, I think. We have had a few clients ask us about sharing job descriptions with people during the recruitment process, actually. And again, it is something to bear in mind that at some point, your external candidate will be seeing that internal document. So you don't want it to be 8 pages of scary stuff. So yeah, so within reason.
Okay. And I think there might be a role design happening at the moment, because quite a guessing specific question. If a role's for a fixed term, say a maternity cover, rather than a permanent one, should the job description remain the same? I guess they're asking if there are amendments that need to be made in light of it being fixed term.
Sure. I mean, I would say if it literally is a pure cover role, then no, it's the same job description. The only thing you're changing is the contract type. So the roles and responsibilities will be the same. Saying that, we do often see with particularly maternity cover jobs, we do see that sometimes elements of the job will be taken away because somebody in there for 9 months or a year might not be able to have the time to do it. So if the roles are staying, the responsibilities are staying the same, then absolutely just change the contract type. But if you're pulling the elements out, obviously amend the job description.
Okay. Another question, a brilliant question, actually. How do you build in part-time flexibility to a job design? Are there key steps to follow, key questions to ask?
Yes. So in terms of job design, this is another webinar, I think. So I'll answer it as quick as I can. The main thing is that stakeholder discussion, and to think about, you know, how important is it that the role is there every day, all day? And if you know that actually the bulk of if it's an operational role and the bulk of your busyness is in the morning, then what you're getting there is, well, clearly morning working patterns would work, but if it's operational, you probably would want 5 days. If it's really ad hoc and quite senior, say, you know, that you need your marketing director to just oversee the marketing manager's work, sign some things off, you know, it could be 2 days a week, and actually midweek, Tuesday and Thursday might work, so that you haven't got a big gap. So there is definitely a process to go through. It very much depends on the type of role that you are thinking about adding in a part-time element to. And we're always happy to have these conversations with you guys, because we know all the formats, we know what works best for what type of situation. So yeah, we can always have a call about that.
Trying to talk when I'm on mute. Hi. Thank you so much for that, Deb. I'm hopeful that everybody found that really useful, and thank you for your involvement, people who asked questions. They were all really, really good, and spurred some interesting answers. I'm going to repeat what Deb said. If any of you need to have a conversation about a specific role design issue that you're having, especially if it supports developing the role into a flexible or part-time opportunity, then we would love to have a conversation with you. Feel free to contact any of us. A mailer went out quite recently inviting people to take advantage of a free consultation. So if you'd like to do that, please do get in touch. I'm afraid that is all we've got time for now. I'm sure you're all desperate to go off and get a sandwich. I know I am. Thank you again. We are experts in this field, so please do take advantage of the knowledge that we've got. Deb couldn't have hit the nail on the head more specifically. It's so key to offer people flexibility at the moment. It really is top of their list of demands. And the market is tight, and people are quite comfortably walking away from things that don't give them what it is that they want. So if you're able to, just giving it some consideration is really, really valuable. Thank you again, Deb. Thanks everybody for joining. I look forward to speaking to you soon. Bye.
Thanks everyone. Bye.